Energy Media readers, we are here on election night and we're talking to Merran Smith, who's the Executive Director of Clean Energy Canada. So welcome, Merran.
Welcome, great to be here.
So we're going to be talking about the election and climate policy, and I want to frame the question like this for you. It seems to me in my reporting that the Libs, the New Democrats, and the Greens all have received high marks for their actual climate policy. Yet we haven't had much of a conversation about that policy. And I find that a little odd. What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I found it frustrating that, the Liberal Party in particular, who put in place what we would say is a very strong foundation of climate policy, with the coal phase out, the clean fuel standard, which is underway, getting developed, a number of things on energy efficiency measures, the electric vehicle rebate. So a solid foundation, and of course the carbon price. And the carbon price really sucked all the oxygen out of the room, created such a polarized debate. We never saw the Liberals shifting to talk about the other parts of their climate policy that was in place. By the time we got to the platforms, I think we just saw that people generally want climate action, but I think part of it is that the population doesn't understand the details of the policy, and secondly, anybody who started to talk about those details really got ripped up. The Conservatives really came in with a lot of erroneous facts about carbon pricing and the impacts of it. It became too detailed to debate, and so people really shifted to a high level of we want climate action, and the parties, not just the Liberals, but all of the parties said, we're going to give you climate action. And you're right, we didn't get into the details, and the devil's in the detail on climate policy, as you know.
Well, okay, that leads me to another question then, is do voters, the majority of voters, actually want to talk about the details of climate policy? Or do they want narratives around climate policy? They want to know that we're doing our bit to reduce emissions and we're developing new technologies and carbon pricing. They want stories that embody the policy without getting into the nitty-gritty of policy discussions. And certainly the Conservatives have done probably a better job of the narrative side of things. So policy wonk versus narrative discussions. What's your take?
Well, I would say you're right. The public wants the narrative. Excuse me. They want the stories, but also what they really are looking for is somebody that they have confidence is going to take action, and somebody that they could trust. And I think there was a lot of debate about that, whether you could trust. And I think because you explained that we really didn't talk policy, that I think the Liberal Party really didn't do a great job getting the narrative out there about what they'd done. And there was a question about whether they were actually committed to climate action. I mean, what we've seen in the analysis we've done of the Liberal actions to date, it's the first time in Canada's history that we've had a climate plan, designed to hit a target. We've had some climate plans, but they were never put in place to actually hit a target. And as you know, we're aiming to hit the Paris target. We have a plan that gets us about 3/4 of the way there, and a commitment to get us the full way there. We have that in British Columbia, and the public's very supportive of it. And then when we had it at the federal level, most people didn't even know that that was there. So you're right. There's a lot of confusion amongst the public. I really hope, anybody comes out of this election recognizing that the Canadian public want action on climate. If you're voting for one of those three parties, and that clearly the majority of the vote is going to go to those three parties committing solidly, the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, to take climate action. And so, I would say the good news for the climate is I think we're going to see that you cannot run an election in Canada anymore without demonstrating your commitment to climate.
Well, we're talking, it's about 7:15 Pacific time on election night. The returns are coming in. The Liberals are ahead 138 to 102 for the Conservatives. So we'll be watching that very carefully, because that gets into something that you said, which is if the voter isn't really worried about the policy details, they're comfortable that there's a policy there that's got the good housekeeping stamp from Catherine Cahill and Andrew Leach. That's enough. But then it becomes, who do they trust? Who do I trust to implement that policy and do it in a way that that brings the benefits and mitigates the risk that I worry about? And maybe that's what this is about. It's really all about, you put your policy out. Okay, we got policy. Now I'm going to come and build trust with you, or sell you that I'm a trustworthy person. What do you think?
Well, I think that Canadians are really beginning to see all the signs that globally there is an energy transition underway. So, I look to things like Amazon buying 100,000 electric delivery trucks, some of the big banks pulling their, like the Norwegian pension fund last week just pulled its investments out of Canada's oil sands, likening it to the coal industry. The fact that we've got electric buses now on the roads in every major city in Canada. And so these tangible symbols that people see, and big companies committing to electric transportation, whether it's trucks or buses or cars, things that they see. I think all of those things, combined with the fact that you're not actually seeing electric vehicles on the road now. For sure, they're not a huge number of them, but it's not one every month that you're seeing in most places. You're seeing them out there. And people aren't afraid of them anymore. And I think that Canadians are going to be looking over the next 5 years to what government is going to actually take us through that energy transition. They see it's happening. They want to understand how is our oil industry and those oil workers and communities going to transition in a way that's fair and just? Who's got a plan for that? But not just putting our heads in the sand and assuming that we're going to be selling our oil and gas forever, but making a plan for our economy to transition as well. So that's what I think Canadians are going to be looking for next. And I think that's exciting, because I think Canada has a huge opportunity there. We've got lots of clean energy jobs. We didn't talk about it a lot this election. And so, that's where I think the narrative really has to shift here, off of this polarization, the pipelines and carbon tax polarization. I feel like we've been stuck in that for four years now. And meanwhile, the world is moving on. And Canada's not in control of this energy transition. In fact, it's really places like China, India, Europe. Solar, I'm sure you saw it, is now cheaper than coal in India. Well, that is going to move forward the uptake of solar enormously. And we've seen the prices of those things drop so quickly. So less so in Canada are we seeing the energy transition hit the ground in a big way. We're seeing some small signs, but it's really happening out there. And so Canada needs to stop debating endlessly about pipelines and move on into the new clean energy era.
Well, let me run something past you then, because 2-3 years ago, I was a little bit bearish on the electrification of transportation. And the reason I was is because the battery scientists and EV analysts that I was interviewing in Europe and in the United States were telling me that automakers or battery makers weren't going to get EV batteries down to the $100 a kilowatt hour threshold, which is generally considered the threshold for price parity with internal combustion engine cars. That wasn't going to happen until like late 2020s, maybe even early 2030s. We just are hearing now that Volkswagen's done it already. And here it is, only 2019. I mean, we're literally a decade ahead, or maybe even more, of what we thought 2 years ago. And this, I have to tell you, Merran, it really has been an eye-opener for me, because it seems like the transition is accelerating. And that's something that's not well understood in Alberta, I can tell you. And I don't think it's well understood in the rest of Canada. And maybe that has to be part of our narrative in the post-election period is, folks, it's coming faster. We need to adapt faster.
Absolutely. So you think of things like, cell phones, digital communications, how we shifted from Blockbuster video to Netflix, how we, you know, a decade ago, it was just a decade ago that the iPhone came out. At the time, nobody imagined that almost every person was going to have an iPhone and that it was going to contain the technology it has. So these types of technologies in particular can move really quickly. And you're right, we're seeing it in battery technology, which means transportation. So, just the same number of years ago, everyone said, oh, electric vehicles, this might work for passenger vehicles, but it's not going to work for trucking and heavy duty trucks. And already we're seeing for the short haul trucking, there is technology out there that's working. Amazon wouldn't be ordering 100,000 delivery trucks if there wasn't.
And
Uh,
electric buses, of course.
the electric buses. And I talked with the CEO of TransLink in Vancouver last month, who just announced, they had 6 new buses. And when you look at the operating costs of an electric bus, you're going to pay back the cost of your bus in 5 to 6 years. So, yeah, that's the numbers that they were giving. And so you're going to pay back the differential between the cost of an electric bus and the cost of a diesel bus. And then from there forward, your operating costs are so much cheaper. So
Let me
it's
ask you a
exciting
question.
technology. And I think you're right. Canada, the message here has to be the transition is accelerating faster than expected. We all knew it was happening. Now the issue is it's accelerating faster than expected. Canada's still in good stead. 80% of our electricity here is already zero emission. We could be moving quickly on some of these technologies because I think, as you know, things like electric buses, we have some of the world's leading companies here in Canada.
Well, now you're a leader in the clean energy field. Even you're a respected voice across the country. So if we agree that in the or maybe we don't agree, but I think we do agree that the one of the benefits of this particular election, even though we didn't talk about policy specifics, is laying the foundation for that conversation that needs to take place now around accelerating energy transition, that kind of thing. So how do we take advantage of that? How do we turn that opportunity for a conversation into real discussion about narratives and policy and all of that?
I think the government clearly has a mandate to move forward on climate action, with it being such a key part of the election. Assuming we get a government in power that wants to take climate action, they've clearly got a mandate. I think it would be great for them to actually come together, because this is definitely an issue that many different parties are interested in. We've talked about how we have to take the politics out of climate action. This is an imperative, and we need to not make it a partisan issue. Certainly, we need to take the partisan nature out of climate. We'll never take the politics out of it. And so I think striking some sort of multi-party task group or some, advisory group to get in place, the first 100 days, what are they going to do on climate action, I think would be a great first step to demonstrate that they've heard Canadians, and that I think that would help them build the trust of Canadians moving forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess while we're on that point, we're now at 148 seats elected or leading for the Liberals, and 102 for the Conservatives, 33 for the Bloc Québécois, 19 for the New Democrats, and 1 for the Greens. Now that actually is a little surprising. I thought we were expecting the New Democrats to perform a little bit better. Now, of course, we haven't got to BC yet, but nevertheless, what's your take on that, given that they have a strong climate platform and they have a fair constituency in BC? Is 19 a little less than you were expecting?
Yeah, I think the Liberals are sounding a little better than what the polls were projecting. And it may just be that some people became afraid. As you mentioned up at the top, there was 3 parties committing to take action on climate change, the Liberals, the Greens, and the NDP, and one who was committing they were going to rip up the existing climate policy, things like the carbon tax and the clean fuel standard, and move us backwards. Their climate plan, when analyzed, shows that our carbon pollution was going to increase by 2030 under their climate plan. I think that might have scared some people when it looked neck and neck up until yesterday. And so that may have shifted some people to move to the Liberal Party, even though I know a lot of people were saying they had to hold their nose to do it. But they knew that the Liberal Party, was going to move forward on climate action in a way that the Conservative Party had been clear that they weren't. And I think, your first question was, I really hope that the Liberal Party can get out there. The number of different things that they've done on climate action and the fact that we've got a plan putting us in the right direction. I think the message to the Liberals that they need to hear is, frankly, you need to do more, and you need to get these things out there, some of them in a way that really are real to people. That the Liberals did some great policy on things like methane regulations, clean fuel standard, carbon taxes. Right. Those are all things that actually people can't see. They're not part of their lives. Things like electric vehicles, electric buses, retrofits, zero emission buildings. Those are all tangible things that people engage with, and I think would give people a sense that things were moving forward. So, the Liberals made some great first steps. What we need to see is them move forward quickly, as I said, quickly in some ways that are really demonstrable to Canadians, and that affects their lives as well, so that they can be part of it. I think we're really seeing Canadians wanting to be part of climate action more than just marching on the streets.
Merran, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate it. And I have absolutely no doubt that post-election, you and I are going to be having more interviews like this, talking about the specifics of policies as they get implemented, but also, and I think this is really important, this whole issue about the national conversation around climate and energy transition, narratives, all of that stuff. I think it's going to pick up in the post-election period and be more critical than it was, or get more attention than it did, over the last 4 years.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
Thanks, Merran. Take care.